Hi, and welcome to AI for UX. This is the space where UX researchers and product leaders stay current with AI innovations. So I'm John Whalen, the founder of Brilliant Experience, and we're a psychology-driven product innovation firm. And so in each installment here of AI for UX, we speak to a founder, one of the latest AI-enhanced research tools, and dive into its inspiration and how it might benefit you, and ultimately where the field is heading. So today, I'm joined by Ned Dwyer, and he's the founder and CEO of Great Question, a UX platform that streamlines everything from recruitment to insight synthesis, powered by Great Question AI. It's built-in research assistant. Um, and so I very much appreciate your time. And so just a quick note, all these videos are not product endorsements. We always pay full price at Brilliant for anything we use. No one's getting paid. It's just for the purpose of learning more about things together. So with that, I'll get us started. So thank you so much, Ned, for agreeing to do this. And I'm delighted to have you here.
Of course, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Of course. Well, let me just start with the basics. So when I'm thinking about Great Question, who's our most important target audience for your product and the kinds of things that you address?
Yeah, so we really support two different user types. I think the primary one is UX research teams and empowering those power users who are really trying to deeply understand their customers. The biggest problem they need help with is in research recruitment, but also in running the different methods, whether it's interviews, surveys, prototype tests, and then making sense of it on the back end. Now, there's a second audience is the people who do research that those research teams support. So in this case, we're talking about product managers, designers, marketers, engineers, really anyone who's trying to understand customers. And so we support those users by putting guardrails in place to allow the research team to define how much or how little they want to democratize access to research, whether it's about which groups of segments of customers they can run research with, which methodologies they can use, and where they can share those insights with the rest of the organization.
That's super interesting. So I do a class AI for customer research, and people ask so often, how do I have guardrails in these things? So that's exactly, you're clearly listening to your audience. So I think it's good for both parties. Um, well, I guess it's good for us to hear what's the typical scenario when either a UX research team or maybe those people who do research will use your tool.
Yeah, so I mean, let's focus on maybe the UX research. It's very similar for both sides, but they're looking to understand some question that they've got about their customers. Uh, they might go and build their research plan inside a great question, but often that we've built offline. They come to great question to kick things off. And so the first thing they'll do more often than not is they're trying to recruit from a panel of their own customers. We make that easy because we integrate with their system of record, whether it's Snowflake or Salesforce or any other sort of CRM, and pipe those people into great question to make it easy to find people that are a good fit for their study. But we don't just let them contact anyone. We prevent them from contacting not the wrong people who maybe have been contacted recently or participated recently. And so this eligibility setting is a guardrail that prevents them from getting into trouble. They can then quickly select a few people they want to run research with and invite them to participate in a study that they set up. Within that study, they can define things like the sample size they're trying to talk to, the incentive amount, the screener questions, the methodology, whether it's interviews, surveys, or prototype tests, and schedule them all through a great question. The cool thing is that it integrates with the tools you already know and love. So it integrates with Microsoft Teams or Google Suite to be able to send out those emails, with Zoom, Teams, Meets, or WebEx to be able to run an interview, or Figma to be able to pull in a prototype. And so then we help to conduct the research. So it happens, and we record it, we transcribe it, and we index it so you can query it using AI or good old-fashioned search to create clips and highlight reels to share with your team. And so this sort of end-to-end process is often run in, maybe 10, 12 different tools. And so we help them to consolidate that into one or two different tools, which significantly increases the volume of research they're able to do while reducing the amount of time it takes to recruit people and do all those other activities and delivering a better participant experience because we're very mindful of like each of those touch points, whether it's about batch sending invites to participate so we don't over contact people, or how we protect PAI and adhere to things like GDPR. Anyway, I might have got a little bit over on that one, but
No,
yeah, hopefully I answered your question.
yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I hear in the background, I was sort of nodding. I was like, oh God, I've done that mistake too. So I so appreciate, all those, I don't know, the intentionality put into it, I think is really impressive. And well, I mean, there are some things that come close. I mean, I can answer this question, but what makes, Great Question unique or a little better than some of the other options out there?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many research tools out there. I feel like there's like a new one. I mean, you must see this. I feel like there's a new
Mm-hmm.
one coming out every day or every other day,
Absolutely.
especially in the age of AI. Look, I think when we're talking to customers about this, because they ask this the same question, like, what's my mental map? How should I position you compared to other tools? One, I would say that uh, the we've designed from day one, we designed to be an all-in-one tool. So this wasn't an afterthought, or we didn't, and then try to build towards this, which is very challenging from an architectural perspective. Or we didn't try and buy five different companies and glue them all together, which some of the private equity-backed companies have tried that approach as well, mostly unsuccessfully. And so we decided from day one that if we were going to democratize research at scale, it had to be an all-in-one. And so let's go and figure out how to bundle together this disparate group of products. Where the nearest analogy I would say to it is in the old days, you would buy a spreadsheet from one company. This is very old days. It's about the 80s now. A spreadsheet from one company, a PowerPoint tool from somewhere else, and then a word processor from someone else again. Um, and and then obviously that's all consolidated into one. And that's ultimately the transition that we've predicted and is now coming true in the UX research space. That buying point solutions which don't talk to each other is very inefficient and makes it virtually impossible to democratize research. So that'll be one. The second is that we are still modular. And so you don't actually need to go and buy all three of those pieces at once. And it's kind of a challenging thing to do from a change management perspective to go and rip and replace. If you do have 10 tools, you have to go and, tell everyone that those tools are going away and transition them onto an all-in-one tool. Often people will start with one module. Typically, it's the research CRM, the recruitment side, and then they'll scale out their additional tools as renewals come up and things like that, as we own the right to help them consolidate. So one, built for democratization, all in one, modular, and then with an enterprise data governance layer that makes it easy to not only democratize research at scale, but allow it to operate inside of the enterprise. So things like data retention policies and user access controls and SAML and SSO, eligibility criteria. Like we've really spent a ton of time thinking about that, so that which is why customers like ServiceNow and Amazon can even use us as their tool of choice,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
while still making it really user friendly, which is why folks like Canva and Brex and Miro use us as their tool of choice as well.
Cool. Um, yeah, I've seen actually that, so I'm impressed that any of you can get through all the vendor management and the lawyers and the security. It's all relevant. It's all fair to do, but on
Sure.
GDPR, but it's a lot. It takes a lot of work. I'm sure you know better than I. Um, well, and actually, for the folks that haven't had a chance to have Great Question yet, maybe you can sort of paint a picture of how they might work differently because they've got this. So, what sort of
Yeah.
after this, how has that changed the way people do research?
Yeah, so I think we look at a customer before and after. Often they're juggling across 12 different tools. And that's like a huge cognitive burden to remember where you have to go for each of these things. And so that slows you down, right? And you've got to go one tool for recruiting your own customers, another for non-customers, a tool for surveys, a tool for prototype tests, a tool for interviews, maybe something else for incentives. And then we've got a repository which is often incomplete because it's so hard to remember to get everything into one place. And so that creates this huge burden in terms of figuring out where to go and when. And the systems never talk to each other, but you also need then licenses across all these tools. You need to understand where to get support on each of these tools. You need to figure out how to stitch them together. It's before we get into things like legal and security, procurement, which you mentioned. And then becomes very challenging then to also demonstrate the impact because having reporting over the top. it becomes very challenging. You've got to go to these different places to figure out what's going on. And so I think after great question, we're helping you not only trim down the number of tools you're using, but in the process, we're able to streamline the time to recruit as one area where we help you. And so the average customer that comes to us, it takes them between 4 and 8 weeks to do recruit for a study with their own customers because they've got to go through a data analyst to go and pull a list and maybe a marketing team to send an email and a
Yep.
few other folks. Now they're able to do it all themselves. Quickly filter down, find the right people, and actually they're filling studies in a matter of minutes instead of months or weeks. And so by consolidating this, not only recruiting faster, but actually we're seeing the rise of rapid research teams who are able to turn around, a pretty significant strategic request from, say, the founders of an organization that would typically take weeks now can be done in 5 days end to end from getting that first question through to distributing the shared output of a series of interviews that they've conducted. So really, I think speed, tool consolidation, but the other would be democratization. Suddenly, there are times when you get requests, I think, from product managers or designers, a designer's trying to do some usability test on something. And sure, a researcher can absolutely step in there and help them. But is this the best use of their limited time and capacity?
Yeah.
Maybe, or maybe they're better off actually, teaching a man to fish and empowering them with the right guardrails in place to do that. That's not really possible if you've got 12 different tools. And if you don't have the ways to go and set the guardrails around who they can talk to, which methods they can use, what incentive they should even pay. But you can still have things like approval flows to prevent them from getting themselves into too much trouble. And then I think the final thing that's actually really exciting for us is that we're also, on average, reducing the tooling costs for research by about 30%. And I think this is really important because if we're trying to democratize research at scale, there's a cost element to it. And some of these tools are really expensive. They might cost $1,000 a seat to go and use. So that becomes very hard if you've got someone that's maybe a product manager running 4 interviews a month versus a researcher that might be running 20 or 30 in a month. It's like how can we justify paying such high amounts for this use case? And so by significantly bringing down the cost, that's a key factor in helping democratize. And so customers that have now 1,000 product managers who are able to run research on a monthly basis as a result of having access to a tool like this, that frees up that ensures that customers are putting at the center of every decision while freeing up the researcher. I'm now rambling, but
Yeah.
there's some of the
No.
ways that life
Yeah.
changes.
I really don't think you are rambling. I get folks in my class to write down the steps they do in research, and they're like, "Oh, I had no idea how long that took to like do X and Y. I never really thought about it." And you're so used to doing it the old clunky way that having something more elegant, they just almost don't think of it. And so I think that combined with there are so many questions and never ever enough UX researchers.
No.
There's a spray paint in Montreal that says "too many causes without a rebel," and so there should be opportunities to do more. And so anyway, I'm very sympathetic to your cause. This is called AI for UX as a podcast, so maybe you can just tell me a little of how you've been thinking about and working with AI in Great Question.
Great. So yeah, we've been thinking about AI now for many years, and we've built in a lot of the sort of like table stakes stuff that I think every platform needs to have. Things like the ability to generate a survey or a screener using AI prompt, automatically creating a title for an artifact like a highlight reel or a clip, suggesting summarizing an interview and maybe chapterizing it, suggesting highlights and things like that. I consider those all fairly table stakes functionality that you'd expect in a research tool, just to make it faster and easier to go and produce the output. We're now moving in a few different areas, and I'll start with the things that are already in the product to the things that are just about to be released. The first is being able to use AI to query across a study. And so you've run a series of interviews, and maybe you're trying to produce a report, or someone's asked you, "Oh, could you tell me what the highlights were? What were the major problems people presented?" You can go and simply ask that question of the AI, it will filter across all those different interviews in that study and come back with a response. But it actually doesn't come back with purely a response. It actually tells you, it breaks it down into themes that it's learning. It links back to the individuals who expressed those themes, and where it can bring in quotes, those quotes will link back to the moment in that interview, so you can verify that it's real, it's not hallucinating. But you can also then turn that into a highlight reel or add it to a research report, so you can share it with your team, so it has impact, so that something actually changes. Which, what's the point of research if you're not actually changing anything?
Mhm.
So that's really exciting. At the moment, that's one of our most popular features, being very favorably compared to other platforms that even are just doing
Mhm.
solving that particular problem. And that's been in the product for probably about a year now. Um, Now we're about to go and release that as for repository-wide search. So previously, this is really challenging. If you've got 15 hours worth of interviews, that's fine. But the large language models get a little bit hamstrung if it's anything larger than that. And while we had built a prototype that allowed you to do it across everything in your repository before, what we found was that the context window is too large, and it would selectively decide what to include, what not to include. And so if you ask it a question like, give me every time a customer has complained about X,
Mhm.
it might only be able to scan over 2 or 3 studies that you've run. Maybe it's a small fraction, but it's not going to tell you that.
Mhm.
And so you're like, oh, great, this is the gospel, but then it makes you second guess it. So we didn't want to release this.
Mhm.
Now, two things have happened. One, the context windows for these large language models have significantly increased. And so it's kind of got for free an increased context window. We've also figured out a couple of tricks to be able to break down all these past interviews to identify the studies or interviews or individual artifacts which are more relevant to the query, so that we can, in effect, target the context that it's ingesting, and we're upfront about which context it's ingesting. This is getting a little bit nerdy, but so step
Yeah.
one is repo-wide AI querying. Step two, about to be released, is the so study-wide querying, repo-wide querying. We're really excited about that.
Yeah.
The
Well,
second thing, oh, sorry, I can keep
oh,
going what we're building, but yeah, happy to
oh, yeah.
pause there.
I was just gonna make a. I'm sorry. I'll let you continue in just a sec. But,
No, no, no.
one of the things that I was going to ask actually was, concern about hallucinations or bias and things like that. And it's clear
Mhm.
you're basically answering, and so it is really interesting to hear, even how context windows I guess have changed over the last probably year and a half or so or less.
Even the last
Um,
3 months.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Mm.
you're adapting quickly. So anyway, I stopped you midway. So please go ahead. I'm happy to hear
No, I
everything.
mean,
I'm curious.
let's touch on that, and then I can talk about some of the new stuff
Of
coming up, because I
course.
think it's an important point. Yeah, we spent a bunch of time trying to reduce hallucinations in the product, and I can talk separately about bias. But I'll give you an example of it. At one point, we in our back-end prompting, we system prompts, we were forcing the AI to include a quote that supported the theme that it had rendered out of the past studies. And we were doing it because it becomes very impactful when you can have a quote where you can play back an interview, but it was also as a mechanism to try to make it identify that it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
hallucinating, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're telling me this thing, give me the evidence. The problem was that when we said, give me a quote, you have to give me a quote that includes this, it starts hallucinating because it wants to please us. It
Mm-hmm.
wants to support us. And so that was actually causing more hallucinations. And so now we have some additional prompts and system checks to say, we really want you to, we strongly encourage you to, but also make sure you don't make anything up.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other checks to go back and validate that it is actually a real quote, which then also helps us to hydrate the quote with the link to the clip, that allows you to then go and validate it. So a ton of work going into reducing hallucinations. And to be honest, I think they're becoming less and less of a thing across most of the systems that, at least that I've been using, that I've seen. There are more advanced technologies. And most of that, to be honest, is at the large language model level. I wish that I could claim 100% authorship on reducing hallucinations in research tooling, but a lot of it's just things that we get to inherit, which is great. I think in terms of the bias question, I think that's such a challenging thing, and we do what we can to reduce the bias through how we handle our prompting. but we also try to advise people in the product. Like there's like tool tips to let people know, like, hey, you should be aware of biases. We have content around that. And we also have some tooling for people who are democratizing to decide, hey, maybe we're not going to provide access to AI querying for people that haven't gone through training. And so you can actually turn off the AI systems in our product holus bolus across the entire platform if you like, if you don't want to have anything access to the large language models. Your organization doesn't allow it. Or you can do it on a feature by feature basis, or you can do it by user basis. And so really like flexibility is one of our core tenets from a product perspective. And this is one way that we think we're supporting it.
Very cool. Yeah, you take anyway. The care you take to make things appropriate for each group is impressive. So just it is what it is. Well, I did want to ask. I think there was maybe a last few features you were thinking about that you're letting out, and I shouldn't hold you back. So I'm really curious to
Sure.
know what else is coming.
Sure. Yeah. So there are two emergent products that we're about to launch that I'm really excited about. The first is AI moderation, and so uh, AI moderation is kind of all the craze. I think in many ways, people are really excited about the opportunities. Some people are scared about it. Personally, I think I always love to try and find analogies to existing technology that maybe take some of the venom out of it. And really, most of the current state-of-the-art AI moderation tools, it's really just a survey that you can talk to, and it can ask follow-up questions. Um, they're not much more complicated than that.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now, the depth to which they ask the follow-up questions, there's some proprietary technology around that, and the latency around how you're able to have a conversation with it is also really important. But what we're seeing in this, even just in that baseline, is 125% increase in not only the word count but also the themes produced from those interactions versus using a traditional survey product. And that makes sense. So they're like on the face of it, it makes sense. First principles, look, it's so much easier to talk than it is to type. Um, and then that allows you to go into more detail. You fill in a net promoter score survey, God forbid, and it says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to promote this to a friend? And you're like, fine, I'll give it an 8. And it's like, why are you do you like this? And you've got a little text box and you're in a rush or you're on mobile, you might just type in something pretty perfunctory to sort of move on and close the window. But where you can actually chat to it, then you might take a little bit more time to explain why you love or hate the product. So that's really exciting. Now, we're taking it the next level beyond just the traditional survey and more catering it more towards an in-depth interview. And so what's the difference between AI moderation as a survey versus AI moderation as an in-depth interview? The real thing is, what is the question that you're really trying to answer? Often I think in a survey, you'll have a list of 10 questions you ask about the individual, but when you're running an interview, you might have a similar list of questions, but you've got this higher level objective you're trying to achieve. And so if you've got this half an hour with someone and they start going down a particular thread, you might decide, I don't care about questions 7, 8, 9, and 10. This is the track. This is actually answering the question that I'm getting. This person is uniquely placed to go and answer this question. So I'm going to keep pulling on this thread until I get to the answer. That's the difference between an AI moderated survey and more of an in-depth interview. Now, is it going to replace researchers or even product managers having to running generative or other interviews with customers? No. There are so many times when you still want that professional, that well-trained individual to be in that conversation. You want them there when they're dealing with, challenging audiences that may be really hard to find, like admins, or really expensive to recruit, or very sensitive, the neurodivergent, or they're minors, or all kinds of, issues when you're probably going to want to put someone in to go and run strategic research versus doing an AI moderated session. Really, on the spectrum of methodologies in terms of the amount of data that you can extract and the time you can get from someone, this is maybe contentious, but I would say it's a step up from a survey versus necessarily a step back from an interview. So I'm really excited
Yeah.
about that. don't know if you have any questions about that, and then I can talk about the final thing that we're working on.
No, I was just going to say, the other thing that we find is that in some ways we're being more inclusive because there are folks like ER nurses or someone. So I'm in
Mm.
the East Coast of the US, so it's not that fun to interview someone in New Zealand. Or, my Swedish and Thai aren't that great. And so this is a way
Mm.
to, include a more global, a more broad sample than we might otherwise on every day, but still have a little more depth than we would have just by having, like you're saying, an unmoderated, survey or just a plain old survey. So, no, I think it's in the right context. I think it's it could really be helpful. So, and you're right, contentious, but we're all getting used to what are the possibilities, and
Mm.
also just again to your point, the folks who maybe aren't UX researchers and still want to get a little more depth. And I know plenty of product owners that just do not have the time to do it, and it would be better than not having anything at all. So, definitely
Mm.
yeah, and makes perfect sense that you're saying that you're really getting more themes and more details. So, so very cool.
Yeah.
Oh well, here let me let you finish up. I know you've got.
Oh, just I guess just to that point, I think
Yeah.
the rise of AI moderation is introducing, and a lot of these AI agents really is introducing a whole new set of problems for us to deal with. And that new set of problems is if I've got 1,000 agents that are working with me that can run 1,000 interviews overnight while I sleep, possibly even answering questions I hadn't thought to ask yet. Um, One, how do we protect our research participants so that they're not flooded and bombarded with a million requests? We already do that today with their eligibility criteria, effectively playing traffic cop. But also, I think it's the role of researchers in being the orchestrators of these systems, so that we don't burn out our users or run unnecessary research with them that's ineffective or wasteful or whatnot. There's a bunch of reasons why you would want to control that. The second is we're able to go and produce 1 million insights. So because we can go and run more research, but also because we can more deeply analyze, be constantly analyzing what it is that we're hearing from our customers, whether it's from data we're purposely extracting for research or it's exhaust from other systems like social media mentions or other surveys or sales calls. And so, how do we prevent overloading our organization, our leaders, with insights that may actually not be relevant to them and their role or their place or this stage in time? And so, I think these are the new breed of problems that we're up against, and those are the things that we're working on. A great question. Um, in terms of the third thing that we're working on, though, is an AI agent to allow you to go and create new research study. And in a second, I'll show you a bit more about the product so
Mm,
you get a sense of how it's built. But when we first built it, it's a step flow. It makes it easy to go and set up a new study, find the right audience, pick the right method, fill in everything you would ever need to go and run a high quality research study. We thought that was really easy, and customers have told us how much easier it is than previous. Like I mentioned, it cuts recruitment time down from
mhm,
weeks to minutes. But then we bring in AI to it, and it gets so much faster and easier to go and produce a high quality research plan and actually start the recruitment.
mhm,
And so I'm really excited about this. So first of all, the first thing it does when you're a product manager, you come with a great question and you're trying to understand how customers think about your invoicing product. Well, you put that query in, and the first thing we do, the best research is no research. And so the first thing we do is tell you everything we already know about it. Because we're a combined research
mm.
CRM with a
Oh,
repository, we're able to
interesting.
first surface like, here are the past studies that have been conducted, here are the past artifacts, and here's the themes that we've found across this.
Wow.
Do you now want to jump down that path, or are you insistent on running new research? And if you are interested in running your research, once you've understood what we already know, we can then ask you a series of questions, which first of all help us understand, should you even be doing this research at all? So, what question are you trying to answer? How does this ladder up to organization's goals? And what will you do with this information? What's it going to actually change? Um, that then helps us to decide, should this even be run at all? But then it also helps us recommend what methodologies, sample sizes, incentive amounts, everything that you need really, screener questions, interview guides, you name it to go and set up that study so you can launch it out into the wild. We also help identify whether or not you should even be doing the research yourself or not. If you're a PM wanting to run a conjoint analysis with miners, we might say, hey, maybe someone else is best placed to go and do this. And so we have an approval flow system in place which helps to route it to the research team so that they can go and conduct it. So I'm really excited about this, where AI is really just furthering our whole mission of democratizing research at scale, by making it easier for the research organization to provide guardrails and support the work of non-researchers while they focus on the most strategic work.
How cool. I just so the first thing we always do is dive in and go like, what's all the research that's on the cutting room floor that might be really interesting that you've missed things on, and
Yep.
so how great to be able to just ask that first and even have it surfaced first. So really cool. Uh, I think at this point we've talked about it a lot. Why don't we go ahead and maybe you can just walk us through a little bit of a scenario of this. So here, I'll try to get the technology rolling, and you can set the stage here.
Great. That sounds awesome. Let's do it. So, this is a great question. This is your dashboard. Lets you see your active studies, how much research you've been running, upcoming interviews, past highlight reels, activity, all kinds of stuff. Um, and the way I typically start, you come in here and you want to run a new study. First thing we do is we let you see all the different methodologies that you might go and run, or I guess, yeah, sub-methodologies. So things like interviews in all the different flavors, like continuous discovery or focus groups. Unmoderated, which includes prototype testing, card sorting, and tree testing in our new AI moderation suite. And then surveys. So we have our own survey tool. We also integrate with Qualtrics if you want to go and run a larger quant survey, or we can even help you build and manage your panel that you might want to go and recruit into as you build a research community of sorts. And so I can select one of these methods. In this case, I'll select customer interviews. And again, this is the old way. I'm may not show you the new way, but the new way is 10 times faster. We thought this was great. So if you like this, you're definitely going to like the new versions coming out. And so first I set my study title, and I'm going to call this The Best Donuts in All of Boston. And I can set a research goal, find out where the best donuts in Boston sold and what makes them great. I can then set a participation limit, so how many people I want to talk to. I'm skipping over participant segments, but this can be used to set up quotas. So things like I want to talk to 50% men, 50% women, whatever your criteria are, we make that we'll be making that easier. If I want to recruit via a uh, not my own customers, but instead recruit via a panel partner that we partner with. We don't have our own panel. We integrate with other panel providers. I can toggle this on, and it's going to set up other steps for me to go and such as a screener and then a recruiting step where I can fill this in. And we handle all the billing on this, and we pass on all our volume discounts we get from our providers. And it's one of our maxims is one less vendor that you need to deal with when running through this stuff. Again, super important to democratizing research at scale. But I'll toggle it off for now. We then help you set up things like incentives and screeners. We even handle consent forms. We support multiple languages. It's all really flexible. Um, I can then go and use our survey screener tool. You can see it's very much like Google Forms, but it's got some bells and whistles in here like skip logic and branching. We also save every attribute we learn about the individual to your profile. And so, as an example, just going through some of these questions, today we might want to talk to people who are daily purchasers of donuts, but later we want to find people that rarely go and find out why they rarely go. We now store that as an attribute against that profile. We'll even push it back into your Salesforce or Snowflake or wherever it is. We have a two-way sync so that other people can use this to find those people in the future. We then set up a calendar or whatever stimuli we've got. We've spent a ton of time on this to make it super easy. And it's got a bunch of bells and whistles in there, like observer rooms, so people can watch in the session without being live in the session. And things like wait lists if someone can't find a slot that works for them. And time proposals. If they're like, none of these times work for me, but I can do 10 p.m. on a Friday night, we facilitate that. We can then launch the study and fund it either from a global wallet, a team-based wallet, or a card on file. which is kind of an easy way to think about budget management. Um, Once I've selected some people to go and recruit for this, I can start running the study. And so here's a study I set up earlier. On the left, we can see all the steps of what we set up in the plan. If I wanted to, I could even customize things like emails that we're sending out to customers or landing pages that you can share to go and help you recruit people to the study. But then I have my participants, and here I can see I can track them through the different processes. So whether they've been shortlisted to the study, they've been sent a screener, they've applied, they've filled in a screener, they've been invited, they've scheduled, or they've completed the study. And I've kind of put thrown the kitchen sink at the all the fields I've got here. You can obviously trim these down, but it lets you see things like, did they have an ideal answer based on what I was looking for? What's their participant rating? Who was the moderator? But I can also go and look at screener responses that I've got here. I can also click into the individual's profile, and this will allow me to go and see everything that we know about them, every attribute we know about them from your CRM or from past research they've filled in. I can even go and see all the screener responses they've got as I sort of work through approving the people that are relevant to my study. And then I can also see the output of past research they participated in. And I think this
Hmm.
is yet another example of demonstrating
Hmm.
how having your CRM and your repository in one place makes it so much more powerful than having this disparate set of tools.
Yeah, it's really I don't remember ever seeing this before. So it is really nice to be able to see, right, we think we're going to have this person, would they be get a sense of if they're appropriate or the kinds of openness or other attributes. I know we're not trying to introduce bias, but at least are they the right kind of, for example, buyer, persona, for example. Really
Exactly.
cool.
Yep. And so it's got a bunch of other bells and whistles in here, and it's easy to contact people and send them reminders and tell them an update on what you learned from the research. And we make it easy to go and self-service things like, why is no one opening my email? And we give you details on all the emails that have been sent. But the key here is then the repository. What do we actually learn here at the end of the day from this study? And again, this is all in one place. We don't have to go and skip around between our repository and our recruitment tool. It's a single point of entry for everyone in your organization. And I can just look at interviews or highlights that have been created from those interviews or reels or insight reports. But then if I want to just go and view something, it starts playing back at multiple speeds right here in the moment. I'll skip a little bit further on. I can see the transcript that's being created, who's viewed it, change the sharing settings. This is a little bit cozy though, so when I open it up into full screen, I can then see the full interview, so I can start coding it up with AI or manually. I can tag it with local tags, global tags, create highlight reels and clips. It's gone and chapterized the interview so I can find the right segment that I care about. I've written out key points and major themes, and this is all using AI. Again, I would kind of consider this table stakes stuff. It's very powerful, but it's largely just something that if your tool doesn't have this, I'd be asking questions. But then the powerful thing is here is, as I mentioned earlier, is the ability to then go and use AI to go and query it to say things like, write a report for me about what we learned, or what were the key themes, or what were the top feature requests. I'll put in what sucks about expense management here. That's what this study is about. And it's going to come back and give me not just a summary of the major themes that were presented, but it'll also reference who are the people that experienced those themes and where there are any quotes. It will give us a quote that we can then go and play back in the from that interview.
Hmm. So this is going across. Actually, to make sure I've got it straight, is this across a single study or potentially multiple studies?
Right now, it's across a single study. So you can see the scope up here is limited just to this particular study.
Uh,
But over the course of next quarter, we'll be rolling out this to across every study that you've ever run, or really any attribute. So you could bring in your Zoom recordings or other data that you want, and then we can query across that as well. Um,
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, we can see this reference the individual that's the candidate that explained this particular issue that they're experiencing to help you sort of get some quantification of it and understand from a hallucination perspective. And if we give it a second, it will bring these quotes to life as well. Here we go. And so here I can click on this, and it's going to take me back to that moment in that interview. And talk through that so I can then add that clip. I can validate it's not hallucinating, but then I can turn it into a clip or a highlight reel to go and share with my team. And soon that'll be automated, automatically producing these highlight reels for you, and artifacts to share with your team. But that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, for those of us who've done it by hand with you download your Zoom and then you crack open Adobe
Oof.
Premiere, that's a lot of time. So no, this is so nice. And I think the other thing, if you haven't done it before, when you finish the 90 person interview study and the C-suite person says, "Did anyone mention this?" You're like, "Oh no, gotta go back." That this is a real sort of lifesaver. Do you, do you you've been so thoughtful about how you present this to team members in an appropriate way. Are there ways that the researchers get a little more under the hood, whereas maybe, I don't know, other people who do research, if I'm just kind of searching through things, or I just didn't know if there were different functionalities for each group. And I don't know if there should be a reason for that or not, but I just wonder, you've thought about it so carefully. I want to hear your approach.
Yeah, look, I think there are differences, and when I think about, oh, well, actually, first of all, to come back to your thing where you run a research report and then the CEO says, "Hey, what about this?" And you're
Right.
like, "I got to go back and find it." I think that's really the power of AI, where
Mm,
previously everyone had search and you could query it, but if you couldn't find I can't remember exactly the word they used, but it was around this.
mhm,
Search is not going to help you find that, but AI querying will help you find that theme. And we had the same thing happen to me, where we rebuilt our prototype testing tool to make it awesome, and it is. And the way that but we didn't. There was no questions in the research plan around pricing. And I was like, "Hey, did anyone mention anything about pricing? Because I need to figure out how we're going to price this thing." And I didn't actually need to ask that question of the researcher. I just went in and queried this. Turns out almost everyone brought up pricing, and it was
mhm,
all around, it's really expensive and it costs around this or that. And that really helped us and we don't like their per seat model and all these other things that helped us to go and craft our strategy that just wasn't present
mm,
before. Um, yeah, I guess in terms of researcher use cases versus people who do research use case, I think the thing that we find and that rings true is that a product manager or designer or someone like that, that's a person who does research, is more likely to go and query using AI once they finish a series of interviews to go and produce a report. They're probably going to edit down the report before they go, the result that we give them before they go and share it with their team, because that's just
mhm.
best practice. But a researcher is more likely to actually go through and manually code the interviews that they're doing.
Sure.
Even though they might find some themes. Hey, I'm pretty sure someone mentioned something around this. They might use that. So it's more of a searching process for individual themes and mentions of those themes to consolidate their report with a sort of manual review. And I think that's the world where AI is going to get you 80% there and 90% there. But for a researcher, a trained professional, that's not really good enough. The types of work they're working on, the confidence levels they need are much different. Um, yeah.
We actually did a study where we did our AI versus human researchers. So I did things the old 2022 way of a human talking to a human, and then with
Mm,
no special tools, and then another group, another PhD researcher doing an interview with humans, human to human, but
mhm,
having all the ChatGPT and so on at their disposal, and then we did AI moderation as well at the time, and it was nearly exactly what you're talking about. We got to about 80 or 85% of the things that we found as human to human interviews captured. There was we were really surprised at the time, this like a year and a half ago, picking up so much that of the nuance that we captured. And so that's really interesting to see. So again, it's that level of precision, I think, is an interesting way to think of it. If we want every nuance, it's probably not the right tool. Um, but if we need this sort of big picture, it's probably very effective. So my
mm.
take. I'm happy for you to have your
Yeah,
own opinion, but
100%. No,
what is
same.
there anything that I've missed here that you wanted to make sure you show up? I know in some ways I'm
Yeah,
like,
I
oh,
think
we need to meet again when you got your new tool, but
I mean, yeah,
I
totally. I mean,
understand.
I'm happy to do that. I almost actually parked this because we're so close to I mean, AI moderation is a week away from being released,
Ah,
and the study builder is also very close. But I figured let's do the session. We can always do another
sure.
one. I think
Yeah.
the only other thing that I think is worth pointing out is like I appreciate your comments about how that we have. we do spend a ton of time with researchers and people do research, and we do, and then we go and put this into the product to solve sort of the use cases that these people go through that otherwise they wouldn't think about, or they don't have time to go and do things like batch sending out screeners or all these little nuances here. I think the only other two things that I think are worthwhile looking at, one is all the work that we've done to make it easier for people to understand what's going on. And so the biggest example here is being able to see all the reporting around, platform usage and completed studies and research across different methodologies and how long it takes you to report on things. And you can break that down by time period or by team. And so I think this is, there's always been this problem in the industry about how do we demonstrate impact as an organization, as a function. And this is one part on our path to go and do that is by automating the reporting we're generating out. Again, only really possible if you've got an all-in-one tool.
Mhm.
Look, otherwise, I think everything else is all on its way out the door. So yeah, looking
Okay.
forward to connecting again once we've got these things out there.
Yeah, great. Well, here, let me take a step back then. Thank you so much for showing me this. And even this without the new things is impressive unto itself. So let me just bring us
Thank
back
you.
here. So thank you for that. That was really helpful. And I think that based on all this work, I do, we've talked about the product so much. I just wanted to ask, you and your team, there's so much dedication anyone puts into this, and it's kind of a bet to go from 0 to 1 to have a product. And so, what inspired you to create this for the field and kind of and clearly stick with it too?
Yeah, so I think my villain origin story, I mean, there's many things I think contributed to it, but the biggest one was when I joined a large company, probably about 10 years ago now, and was trying to understand, you know, our customers and their problems. I was director of product, so I was trying to build a product strategy, and I wasn't getting the answers I wanted. I met with the UX research team who were awesome, but all I got from them was a lot of like no's, this is not a strategic priority for us. We don't have a research repository, can't tell you what we already know. No, we can't help you with recruitment. And no, you can't use our tooling even because it's too expensive. And so all that I really wanted was less roadblocks and more sort of like roadmaps to go and understand
Hmm.
who our customers were.
Yeah.
And I just felt like there was a better way. And how do we democratize? I didn't even know democratization was a topic at that point. Was a concept. And so that was the original fuel which got us to go and get started. And it took me, we're almost 5 years old now, so it took me 5 years to actually get up my butt and actually do something about it. I think the pandemic helped in some regards in that I had a lot more free time to go and figure these things out trapped indoors. But also that no one had gone and tried this. There were all these point solutions, but no one had actually gone and built an all-in-one. So yeah, really glad we're doing it. We're so early in the journey. 5 years in, I think we're making great progress. 80% of all users on the platform are non-researchers. So that gives you
Mhm.
some signal of
Yeah.
like of how much we're actually successful in democratizing. And we are working with some of the world's largest brands like, the Bloombergs and the Amazons and the ServiceNows and the fast growth folks like Gusto and Canva, et cetera, as I mentioned. Um, but yeah, the world's a bigger place. I think we've converted the converted, right? We're
Mm.
supporting the converted that already believe in democratization. Now there's the 95% of the rest of the world that still is going about it the old-fashioned way.
Well, I have found so I have both a class for UX researchers to really understand and dive deep, and I also work with product managers, and it's just a fact that these things are getting so easy and so, like to your point, having more thoughtful guardrails that it really is possible to do without a researcher. So those old days when you got a bunch of no's, logically I could go and call up, service three and then do it myself. So I think us researchers have to acknowledge the sort of the current reality and find a way to get really excellent research done regardless. So very cool.
Mm.
Well, that speaks to sort of the future. And so you've clearly outlined a lot of where, a great question is heading. But I didn't, I guess if there's anything else I missed, we could talk a little bit about how you see your, great question evolving over time. And I wrote down 2 years, but of course nobody knows at that point. Um, But also, how do you see, this whole research enterprise changing over time? Because you've got such a good vantage point to look at this.
Yeah, look, I think for us, we're going to continue on our mission to lower the floor on making research accessible to everyone in your organization, not just researchers, not even just product designers and engineers. Everyone should be able to understand your customers deeply based on what they already know or based on commissioning and running new research with guardrails. Um, but also while raising the ceiling on what's possible with our strategic researchers who I see there being, I think we're going to end up having more UX researchers on the planet with tools like Great Question and with the rise of AI than we have before. I suspect there'll be, some many more than there are today in 2 years' time. If we look into the future, because they're going to be needed to focus on this big strategic work where a PM or a designer is just completely out of their depth in going and running a conjoint analysis of some large strategic decision that needs to be supported by a PhD. But also they need to be helpful in providing the guardrails that are going to be unique to every organization and their needs, which audiences they're running research with, which methodologies are relevant, what decisions are they trying to make. And so that orchestration of the AI agents, but also of the guardrails, I think is going to become really important. I think for us, the real thing that we are striving for and that we're really excited about is how do we help organizations answer questions that they didn't even think to ask yet? How can we understand based on what they've told us and what they're researching, what their industry and category is, what we're seeing in their quantitative data and other qualitative data? What are the things that are most important for them that we need to go and identify and highlight, leveraging AI systems to help us do that? So that's very big and ambitious,
Mhm.
and also intentionally vague for this audience,
Of
because
course.
we'll be able to come back to this in 2 years' time, and you'll see what we've built.
Yeah, fair enough. Exciting. And yeah, it's evolving so fast that hats off to all of
Mm.
you keeping up in product land. I just get to be a
Yeah,
recipient.
yeah.
So,
It's
um,
scary. It's scary and fun. Yeah.
well, and if, folks really, were like, wow, we need something like that. And there were so many times I kept being like, oh yeah, that was a problem too. Um, how would people, reach out or get started or try things? How do you recommend they connect with you?
So first of all, anyone can go to greatquestion.co, soon.com, and try out the product. We've got a 2 week free trial. Go crazy and check that out. I personally love anytime any opportunity to go and engage with the customer. So if you've got a particular problem you're trying to solve, or a question about the product, or a technology decision you're trying to make, or even just pushing back on some of the things maybe I've said about AI and the future of AI, please email me, ned@greatquestion.co. You can also find me on LinkedIn, just Ned Dwyer. And yeah, we'd love to hear from folks.
Cool. Well, Ned, thanks so much for sharing. Great question, your thoughts, and clearly your energy and thoughtfulness. I hope everyone follows that level of sophistication in making a flow so elegant. So yeah, I really appreciate you doing this with me. And so I'll just sign us out. But thank you so much, Ned.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you. See you soon.
Sure. So, everyone, that's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we look forward to having you here and keeping up with the latest on AI for UX research. So, please let us know in the comments other things you want to learn and keep connecting with it and wishing you brilliant insights with AI.